I figured this game was going to be fun, but I had no idea how much I would end up enjoying it. I've heard people sing the praises of this game all the time, but I always disregarded it. After a while, I got tired of not knowing for myself and I gave it a shot. I got into the game for a bit, but stopped playing because I was really bad at it. I heard about the remake coming up, and I decided that I wanted to give the game another shot. I'm so glad that I did. If I'm on top of things, the remake and this video should come out on the same day. All that aside, I want to take a look at what exactly made this game so good and why it's still loved to this day. This game is very much different from the previous ones in the series with an over-the-shoulder look instead of an overhead one. Hiroyuki Kobayashi, the producer of the game, had this to say in regards of the new changes.
I've worked on a number of Resident Evil titles in the past, and honestly, I think the series had been recycling the same patterns, the same gameplay each time. The creators were starting to get bored with it, and many moved to other projects. So I spoke to Mikami-san, the director, and we talked about reshaping the series and winning back the fans, as well as winning over new fans who thought they would never play a Resident Evil game. So, in order to revitalize the series, we've given it a complete makeover.
This innovation changed the franchise completely, and even though some may say that it leads to bad games in the future, I wouldn't know because I haven't played them yet, this game in particular feels a lot more fresh than the earlier ones. This new view feels a lot more personal, and we get to feel like we are Leon and not just controlling a marionette. It's not that the earlier ones are bad, it's that this style lends itself more to immersion. I feel like the zombies are closing in on me, not just Leon. Not being able to move while shooting also contributes to that. I know that Glenn Schofield, one of the creators of Dead Space, spoke specifically about this mechanic and said that they wanted to avoid being stationary while shooting, and while I think that is implemented really well in Dead Space, being able to move and shoot would not work quite as well in Resident Evil 4. I've played the demo and I know that you'll be able to move in the remake. It works fine there, but the Kanados are a lot faster, so it's a bit of a trade-off. A lot of the strategies for the original, whether they are the boss fights like Chief Mendez or the rooms like the Water Hall, are strongly influenced by spacing. You have to find an ideal point to shoot from while not taking damage, while also giving yourself time to reload. Another thing that adds to immersion is the fact that this is the first game in the series to have enemies react differently to being shot in different places. The laser sight is really helpful, and this game would be a lot worse without it. It helps to conserve ammo, especially in areas like these that have a lot of enemies. Ammo is really plentiful, but if you don't go out of your way to loot, you can come close to running out pretty often. Oddly enough, there is some disagreement about the genre of this game. Some people tend to view it as an action game with survival horror elements, which is an assessment I can agree with. The game is a lot more focused on the action set pieces and sprinkles the horror and scares very sporadically. I think taking things in this direction keeps the player on their toes and makes the scares that do happen a lot more effective. An oversaturation of scare attempts just makes me mentally check out unless the game is like Dead Space and creates an overall eerie atmosphere. That's also a valid way of keeping a player engaged. For Resident Evil 4, there was a distinct effort put into using the natural settings of day and night to instill more fear. During the day, you can see enemies a lot more clearly, and you are meant to be able to feel evil itself in the air, while at night, those same enemies can seem just a little bit more vicious. Speaking of enemies, this game has a great variety of them, and I think that they do a great job of setting them in a way that increases the difficulty in a way that is just gradual enough that you feel prepared for each situation. We start the game out with Leon being driven to a village in Spain by two local cops. They drop him off and Leon gets a call from Hunnigan, who will serve as the guy in the chair. She also serves as a good way to give the player some exposition and make things like the playing manual a lot more natural, and because of that, you can stay a lot more immersed. After the call, Leon enters the house and meets his first Ganado. I remember my first ever playthrough of the game. I skipped all the cutscenes and was so confused as to why this guy was coming at me. I ran away, paused the game, and looked up how to shoot in Resident Evil 4. I definitely like the fact that the game isn't interested in holding your hand and just kind of throws you in. Too many games are obsessed with slow, mandatory tutorials, and as a kid who would rush to the PS2 as soon as I got home from GameStop, I would be super excited to play a game just to be slowed down by an unskippable tutorial. Just throw me into the fray and let me learn as I go, or if you feel like you have to, show the buttons on the screen. After killing the first Ganado, jumping through a window, and killing a few more Ganados, we get to the village. The village is the best part of the early chapters in my eyes. Running in to kill the Ganados, then heading into the house and having the chainsaw guy show up. Being killed by the chainsaw is annoying, but I think it keeps the player on their toes and adds to the challenge. Killing the Ganados by themselves is pretty easy, even in groups, but adding the factor of possibly being one shot is nerve-wracking. I also want to throw in that I can never kill the chainsaw guy until I went through on New Game Plus, so I'm wondering if he's unkillable in New Game. I never got a straight answer from the wiki, so let me know. The Del Lago fight is an interesting one. I had a little trouble at first not knowing that I could steer the boat, and I got knocked out of it a lot. I like the idea of using harpoons against it, mainly because Moby Dick was one of my favorite books growing up. There are some pretty cool Easter eggs that come along with the lake, and I'm interested to see how they adapt those in the remake. Once Leon gets to the other side of the lake after defeating Del Lago, he stumbles into a house and passes out. After Leon wakes up, we see the first appearance of the Plagas. This moment is one of those effective scares that I was talking about earlier. I like the variation possibilities that come with these transformations. As the game goes on, you'll probably notice that if you die in a room with a Plaga and then start the room again, the same Ganado won't be the one transforming, but one of the Plagas will always show up. Once you flip the switch here, you can head to the cave behind the waterfall to get the round insignia, which opens the church that Ashley is being held in. On the way, you'll have to kill El Gigante. El Gigante was a very frustrating boss. In fact, I would say that he was the second most frustrating boss in the game. If you save the dog at the beginning of the game, he comes to help you and that can make it a little easier on you, but those things are bullet sponges to the max. It isn't the worst thing in the world, but I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over with little to no visible impact. I like the Plaga coming out of its back and the parts where he tries to roll things at you, but other than that, you can just run from end to end, trying to get an opening for 5 seconds so you can shoot him. After killing El Gigante, you come back to the church. The puzzle here is a little bit annoying, but not as annoying as this one, which I'm going to talk about later. It just feels a little off, but not bad exactly. Honestly, I'm just angry that this took me more than 30 seconds. After that, we find Ashley. This is as good as a point as any to talk about the escort sections of the game. She was better than most escorts that you have to deal with in games, but sometimes I just want her to shut up. I know someone being scared in this scenario is realistic, but this is one of the few times where I would appreciate less realism. She can be a drag a lot of the time, and I do like the points where you go back to being solo. It's a nice change of pace. Escort missions are looked down on for a lot of good reasons, but this is probably the best implemented version, at least in my eyes. The cabin was the bane of my existence at first. I was stuck on it for so long because of the Plagas popping up everywhere. I ended up just running from upstairs to downstairs and using the grenades as much as possible. Finding out that the flash grenades insta-killed the Plagas was like finding the cure for polio. I was genuinely ecstatic. After that, it was just a matter of health and resource management. After the cabin, you can choose 2 different routes. Take on a bunch of Ganados, or deal with another El Gigante. I chose the Gigante and just ran away. He killed me a couple of times, but once I figured out a way to run without him catching me or Ashley, it was super easy. There's a ski lift that takes you down while Ganados attack, and it's really easy if you have the rifle, but if you don't, you can either shoot them with the pistol or the TMP. This part was somewhat difficult and you will more than likely die if you let them get too close. Once you get to the bottom, there's an optional route that has some treasure and it's pretty easy. The main point of coming down here though is to fight Chief Mendez. I really enjoyed the Chief Mendez fight. The fact that this seemingly stocky man becomes a spindly, spider-like creature once he gets hurt is some really good subversion. Keeping him off you is pretty easy in his first stage, but once he transforms he becomes a lot more mobile and a lot more dangerous. Suddenly a guy who you could just shoot from the upper level can follow you up there. He got a lot harder to hit in this stage and I ended up just getting within his hit range to get a clear shot and trying to outlast him. It eventually worked and he dropped his eye. The eye operates the retinal scanner to open the door out of the village. Once the door opens, a truck comes down the hill. After shooting the truck crashed and a dozen Ganados got out. The first time I went through, I didn't notice until I saw Ashley looking back. I turned, saw them, and took them out, and then a cutscene started. A lot more Ganados show up. So Leon and Ashley run into the castle. The castle is my favorite part of the game. It has the best mix of strong enemies, bosses, and regular ganados, these ones wearing religious clothing. The castle's first room is filled with catapults that rain down balls of fire. These balls of fire stagger Leon, but as others have pointed out, Ashley acts as if she doesn't have a care in the world, but then she might just slow down and get killed by said catapults. It's not really that bad of a thing because you just have to be cognizant of the risk, but considering how she'll just duck down in places she could just run away from and be safe, this can get really annoying. Once getting a key into the castle, we meet Salazar. For some reason, the fact that Sadler and Salazar both start with S made me think that they were the same person for the longest time. The Garrador is the first mini-boss in the castle. He's pretty easy overall as long as you keep moving and don't let him get too close. I really do like the sequence of him waking up as you enter his cell. I'm a little confused as to why he was locked up in the first place and the others weren't, but that isn't really a big deal, just something that sticks out to me. Him busting out of his chains was a cool enough moment that I'm willing to ignore that nitpick. Ada, a former associate of Leon, shows up. She is pretty mysterious and only shows up to save Leon or to give him info. I found it funny how she appears in 5-4 just to say, let's split up, as if we hadn't been doing that the whole time. I appreciate the fact that she's in a role similar to Luis, and isn't shown often, but when she is the highlight of whatever cutscene she's in. Waterhall is considered to be the hardest room in the game, and for good reason. The aspect that sticks out to me is the amount of possibilities. You can run up to them berserker style, you can stay back and pick them off. Either way, this room will definitely leave an impression on you. Thankfully, I was bad enough that I didn't have to deal with the archers coming into the room. Novistadors are the most difficult enemies in the game. This is mainly due to them turning invisible then coming out of nowhere to kick you. The best way to deal with them is to just memorize where they show up and use the shotgun, because you don't have to be nearly as precise and you only have about a second difference between them reappearing and them attacking you. Luis is someone I've been avoiding talking about up until now. It wasn't a matter of him being bad, it was just more me wanting to formulate my thoughts correctly. Luis is probably the most intriguing and well-written character, mainly because of the information on how he is involved in all that is going on in the game. I really enjoyed learning that the mysterious gunslinger that showed up to help me sometimes was also involved in the discovery of the Plagas in the first place. It seems like Luis lives a lot longer in the remake given that he's present in the double El Gigante fight, and I'm not quite sure I'm happy about that kind of change. I prefer learning about Luis through his notes on my own by my own choice. Given that people theorize there are co-op elements in the remake demo as shown here, I think Luis will serve as a co-op role to gauge how people like doing that for the inevitable Resident Evil 5 remake, and it will test how well it plays in the new format. If people praise it, then the RE5 remake will come out a lot quicker, but I think doing that will ruin the intrigue of Luis. The reason for that being that I'm pretty sure that if he's along for the ride, there will probably be a cutscene where he just explains all of his involvement, and I really don't want that. I could be completely off here, and this thing I just showed you is for Ashley, and I hope that this is the case. But if it's not, I think the story will take a major hit. After Luis is killed by Sadler, I just love my dog. We get to the Ashley section. I'm really glad that this section is short. It's an interesting idea to have the enemies who are complete fodder become a high level threat. It gives a little more perspective into how helpless Ashley truly is, but we really didn't need that perspective. Her part just isn't very fun or engaging. It sounds good on paper, making an action horror title a true horror title, but it's just a drag in practice. The double El Gigante fight is an interesting one. Personally, I think it's meant to be a skill test to show the player how far they've come, similar to how in The Force Unleashed, you face the Purge Trooper alone, then face two of them in the next room, but in this case, the two fights are a lot further apart. But if you don't want to deal with that, you can just dunk one of them into the lava. One of the best aspects of the game is, despite the fact that there's some linear progression going on at times, you still do have a lot of options. How you kill them, where you kill them, if you kill them at all is up to you. This variability allows for a lot of replay value. People will go back to a memorable point just to see if a different strategy would work in that scenario. Remember the Novistadors? Well, these are a weaker version of the Novistadors that fly and are only dangerous in groups. These are a lot easier to take out when they clump together though. They mainly show up in two places, here to kidnap Ashley again, and in this cave. This part of the game can get really annoying and they make it nearly impossible to get out unscathed. It can get pretty frustrating trying to outmaneuver one of them just to get kicked by another one that just entered the room. The fight with Salazar was very fun. I was engaged the entire time I played this part, with the Plagas running around on the ground, and arms swinging around above you. If you do the same thing over and over, you'll die pretty quickly. You gotta shoot the head as much as possible, but always stay aware of the arms. After Salazar is dead, Ada takes Leon to Sadler's Island. The island is really odd to me. It's pretty much the early game, but with some more bosses and bullet sponge ganados. Assumedly, these guys were either manual labor workers or former military, so I don't mind them being really strong, but it is an odd skill jump from the previous chapter. The game is pretty gradual up to this point, so it is a little jarring to have to deal with these super ganados. Given the story, the quick shift again makes sense, but maybe they could have made the base ganados a little bit stronger to close the gap, or made the plaga spawns a little less often with the island ganados. I think making them stronger was a good idea, but the sudden increase jarred me just a little bit. The game does a good job of increasing your skill to the point where you can deal with it, so you should be fine. Regenerators are a bittersweet part of the game to me. On one hand, them showing up randomly and feeling like they could be around any corner adds to the horror of their premise. On the other hand, I really hate trying to shoot the plaga on their backs. Shooting their legs just to have them squirm around while I'm trying to line up a shot gets really annoying really fast. In all fairness, it is good game design. These things are meant to keep coming no matter what. The note that can be found in the lab tells us as much. It would be really lame if it just sat there and did nothing. There's a reason why this game gives you the most pesetas for any non-boss after you kill them. That being said, I really hated whenever these things showed up. The Krauser knife fight is a definite highlight of the game, and despite being one of the earliest, it happens to be one of the best QTEs I've ever played. I know they get a bad rap nowadays, and deservedly so, sometimes, but I have a soft spot for them that started with The Force Unleashed. Ever since, as long as you give me a cool moment and a cutscene that I can interact with, I'm totally down for it. The dialogue here is pretty cheesy, and for a game that was handling exposition well by using Hunnigan, saying things like, "As you know, I'm American," doesn't really fit for me, and in a worse game, I would be not as willing to wave it off. The thing that redeems it for me is the fact that the fight itself isn't super serious. I've heard people describe this fight as being very anime, and yeah, that definitely fits. I think that this is meant to be Leon at his coolest, squaring off with a former comrade one-on-one, which is not something that he gets to do often. When he does go one-on-one, it's usually against some horrifying monster. This is a nice change of pace, and it does let us see how good Leon truly is at this point, without going too overboard. U3, or It, is the bane of my existence. El Gigante was the most frustrating boss at first, then this one came along. Having Sadler's pet chasing you in a collapsing structure is a really good idea. It's a very well designed boss fight that forces you to think on the fly, and it's pretty unforgiving. Dodge too late, let U3 get too close, and you're as good as dead. I got caught by him way too many times, and when I did, he had 2 kill animations that really play into the whole hunter and prey dynamic of the fight. U3 feels like he could be right above you at any moment, ready to strike. Krauser's final battle was a masterpiece. The decision to have a guerrilla type fight against him really made it for me. I hit him with a rocket launcher and thought he was dead, just for him to appear around the next corner. I read somewhere that at this point Krauser has 10,000 HP, and for some reference, Sadler, the final boss of the game, has 4,000 HP. I was definitely mad that I wasted my rocket launcher here, but whatever. Outside of that, after dealing with Krauser for a little bit, we get to the final stage of his fight. It turns out that Leon's knife does more damage than any other weapon, and some people have theorized that this is because the devs want to show that canonically, Leon beat Krauser with a knife. I like that. It's a nice little Easter egg that you won't find unless you experiment a bit or you look online. If you choose not to use the knife, you have a well-designed and challenging boss fight. If you do use the knife, the fight gets easier, but it's still difficult unless you cheese him, and even that can be hard to time. All in all, this is a great experience. 5-4 is the big finale before the final boss, and I think it really accomplishes what it set out to do. The first area is pretty easy and doesn't require a ton of effort because of the help of Chopper Mike. Chopper Mike was a really good ally addition here. He's helpful, but the area is still challenging, and he's also fun enough that his death is impactful. After that, we get to the final room of the game. This is a lot more difficult than Waterhall in my eyes, given how this room always has archers and this Gatling gun Ganado. Once you kill them, you get a key card and have to use it to unlock a door while Ganados rush in. This is where the room gets really hard, but like most areas in the game, you will only need to keep moving and not be like me and get caught in this little room. After getting through the door, we link up with Ashley and get saved by Ada again. Leon and Ashley kill the plagas in their body and head outside. Leon gets a bad feeling, tells Ashley to hang behind, and goes up an elevator. Leon is greeted at the top by a tied-up Ada and Sadler. Sadler transforms, and the fight begins. The Sadler boss fight is really disappointing. It's clearly easier than all the other ones by far, and even though I died against him a few times, it wasn't really challenging me in a way that made me want to keep fighting. To hurt Sadler, you have to shoot him on the eyes on his legs, then shoot his head. Seems simple enough, until you realize that you can't shoot the front eyes anymore and have to shoot the ones on his hind legs. Because his AI is so aggressive, Sadler is almost always facing you. Now this could be a good opportunity for the developers to let the player come to a creative solution, but instead, you can either get under Sadler and hope that you can aim quickly enough with the shotgun to damage the eye without getting hit yourself, or you can get on the other platform and try to hit it with a rifle whenever Sadler slightly turns. You might think that the rifle is the best option out of the two, but going that route means that you will get a 1-second window in between Sadler throwing things at you that will cut your health in half and being able to take the shot. I got tired of dying because I'm not Chris Kyle, so I watched other people's playthroughs and saw that they had Ada throw them a rocket launcher, so I used the one I already had in my inventory and he died. This game had so many awesome and memorable villains just for the last one to be dumb and unengaging. The only reason I want to replay the fight again is so I can take Sadler down again now that I know how to. Finally killing him in the first playthrough was fun because of all the annoying times he took Ashley, not because of how well done and hard fought the fight itself was. I loved the demo, but if I were to give any criticism, I would say that it would be nice to keep the OG controls. I spent a lot of time ducking instead of running because the button changed. They did a good job of expanding on the house in the beginning, having you go down into the basement, and after that the Ganados come into the house. Speaking of the Ganados, I love them having twisted heads once they get severe damage. It feels like something the team would have done back in 2005 if it weren't for the technical restraints of the time. Obviously it looks great, but a thing that stands out to me and that I really like is the color change. I know that the game is set in the fall, but the demo makes things look a little bit more lively, and I think that the remake is set a little earlier in the fall. The color change does make the village look a little bit more lived in, which I can always appreciate. These were normal people before Sadler's involvement. They also are clearly making an effort to emphasize the isolation that Leon feels, and that shines through. As I mentioned before, you can move and shoot, and the Ganados are a lot faster here. You can't play the village in the same way that you would in the original, and if you do, you'll get grabbed up pretty fast. There's a big community surrounding the speedrunning of this game. The night I beat the game, I went to YouTube to watch one of said speedruns, and being the person I am, I watched the last 20 minutes of one and decided that I could do it. I was wrong. I thought that I could get a sub 2 hour time easily with no experience in speedrunning this game. I was wrong. I chose to do my attempt in New Game Plus because I figured it would be easier. I started out fine, but as soon as I went upstairs instead of just shooting this window out, I pretty much doomed my run. I also tended to rush through puzzles and then get them wrong and waste precious minutes on them. I will say though, this puzzle is just off. It's probably the easiest one in the game in terms of actual thinking, but rotating the thing is very annoying and it seems to never turn the way you want it to. This chandelier jump took me 2 tries on my normal playthrough, but it felt like 10 in the speed attempt. It was just all around bad. Around the time that most runners finish, I was at the catapult stage in the castle. In fairness to myself, it was 6 in the morning at this point and I hadn't slept. When I got to the elevator in 4-4, I died and I was so tired I got up from my chair and went to bed. I do want to say that despite a few complaints here and there, this game is a genuine masterpiece. The corny elements are woven in very well to lift the mood without sacrificing the emotional impact. I know people find it odd that Leon has seen so many horrible things and manages to quip all the time, but I like the character choice. Leon has a job to do, and if he lets things drag him down too much, he could get sloppy and fail or maybe even die. I feel as though joking is his way of coping with the horrors he is surrounded with. The game does a good job of making me care about the characters without taking away too much from the action that makes it so fun. If I had to use one word to describe this game, I would say balanced. Other than the difficulty jump from the castle to the island, which I will say again makes sense, every element is balanced well and things build up on each other until the end. I might disagree with the destination, but the journey is so good that it makes it all worth it.